fellow travelers along the path of the beam. I am known on this level of the tower as Jaime and Fuego, and if it please you, join me here for a bit of palaver with my quartet on Hail to Stephen King. What is up, y'all? Bienvenidos and welcome to the horror show. You can just call me Fuego for short, and this is once again for the 95th episode. God damn! Hail to Stephen King that I do twice a week, every terrifying Tuesday, every spine-tingling Saturday. And this is a special look at a film that just celebrated its 35th anniversary just like 2 days ago on August 12th. That is none other than the Teague feature adaptation of Cujo. Yes, that's right. Now, Cujo was a novel that had come out just a few years before, and I'm just going to be upfront about this. Cujo is not one of my favorite Stephen King stories. It just really isn't, you know. It's but it does do some very interesting world building, being the fact that it is a castle rock story, the second one, in fact, taking place after the Dead Zone, and in fact featuring a lot of repercussions and even some of the characters from the Dead Zone, namely Sheriff Bannerman, who basically teams up with Johnny Smith in the Dead Zone to find the killer that turns out to be Frank Dodd, spoiler, who was also on the sheriff's force and stuff like that. So I'm not here to talk about the novel, though. I've been thinking for a while about doing a retro Cujo discussion, and I'm sure I'll touch on a few points of the novel here, but I can't say I'm the biggest fan of the story, and for that reason I just was not programmed to be the biggest fan of the Cujo film. But that doesn't mean that I don't find merit in a lot of what it does, including performance, including the actual production and look of the film and stuff like that. So yeah, here on the horror show, y'all, we always do a little bit of just overall impressions, then we talk acting, then we talk production, and all kinds of other things like that. And so it's funny because of the fact that overall impression, it's a well-made movie. I know King has gone on record to say a couple interesting things. First and foremost, that he has like donuts for recollection of actually writing the source material. He was becoming the king, and the king was fond of putting things up his nostrils, as he has admitted. He was like, whereas later he got more into other things and whatnot. We're not really here to tarnish our dude's legendary legacy or anything like that, but in the 80s, King was kind of a maniac. He was the king of the world, or at least the horror world, and especially in 1983 when this film came out, because of the fact that he put out 3 different movies this year. Ironically, the first one to come out being Cujo, this one, on the 12th of August, and then a couple months later, in October, I want to say October 21st, yeah, he puts out The Dead Zone, Cronenberg, one of the absolute best adaptations ever of a King book. And then, in December by, Mr. Carpenter, John Carpenter that is, the horror master as he calls himself on Twitter, which amuses me. Yeah, you had Christine coming out. And so, yeah, tentpole year for King, between books that he released, a few others being, he put out Christine that year, he put out, he also put out Cycle of the Werewolf that year, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, he did. And obviously Pet Sematary, which was just, what a watershed year for the King. But despite the fact that he doesn't remember actually writing the book, which is kind of funny, it did serious world building, in just expanding the view of everything Castle Rock and whatnot. And he actually likes the movie a lot. He's gone on record to say that he thinks it's one of his best adaptations. So despite the fact that I'm not the biggest fan of the story, I will in fact say that I do think they nailed most of what the tone was, and really it's less about a rabid dog and more about a family fighting through crisis, and 2 different varieties of crisis. A good chunk of it, at least in the film, there's not as much. There's actual internal thoughts of Cujo in the book and stuff like that, like weird, just degenerative frame of thinking and stuff after this dog gets bit by this rabid bat after he sticks his hole in this little like cave place when he's trying to chase down this rabbit and stuff. And the film starts cold opening and just goes right into that, no dialogue, just very minimalistic music, and there you have this big old Beethoven, this Saint Bernard, chasing around this little bunny wabbit, and that waspy wabbit, and we see exactly what transpires a little later into the book. And then film starts with a bit that I thought was a lot more interesting in the novel, and it's just very, very briefly grazed over at the very beginning of the film. And that's where Tad, the son of this Trenton family, where you can kind of tell pretty quickly that there's just a weird unspoken tension, you know, that you can tell that there is major love, especially between father and son. But the mom, played by Dee Wallace, who is a dynamite performance by her in this, one of many, you know, she was coming directly off of E.T. and The Howling in like a year or so before this. And so yeah, she was on a roll, and she was a big name, hence getting top billing, and you know, she gives a hell of a performance, which I'll get into in a moment. But you can definitely tell that there is more of a genuine connection between Tad, little Tadpole, as the creepy, you know, carpenter guy who we'll get to in a little while, calls him. But yeah, there's he is positive that there's someone in his closet, a boogeyman, a monster of some sort. And, you know, it's just at the very beginning of the film, but it's a really interesting, hinging story point in the novel. The novel is way better than this movie. I'll at least mention that. Even if I'm not the biggest fan of the novel, it's significantly better than the film. That's not knocking the film quality or anything. But the person, spoilers, in his closet is the ghost of Frank Dodd. Yeah, the ghost of the killer from like the first half or so of the Dead Zone. And so that's a really interesting like subplot that's completely omitted from the film. But for me, it was one of the most fascinating and interesting things. I found that far more frightening than this rabid dog. At least for me personally. You know, I grew up a dog person. You know, my dad trained German Shepherds for decades. We bred them and stuff, and you know, he bred them, he trained them for Phoenix Canine, and so obviously that's not a Saint Bernard, and nor dealing with rabid dogs or anything like that. But I know there's some people who just have that phobia of dogs, and I've never experienced something like that. So I think that this story would be much more effective for somebody who has experienced that sort of trauma and stuff like that. But I guess for me, for that sheer reason, it just doesn't hit home quite as hard. But I could see how for some it would. But yeah, that's it. Omitting that stuff with the Ghost of Dodd. Yeah, it's unfortunate, but I guess it kind of makes sense that it wouldn't be mentioned, especially since when this hit theaters, the Dead Zone hadn't even come out. And there's a character in this that gets killed that is a major player, played by Tom Skerritt, in the Dead Zone that comes out 2 months later. So they messed up on that. The Dead Zone definitely, you know, since it was written before and based on the chronology of characters and stuff, it really should have been released. But that's just me nitpicking. Cujo kind of exists on an island, and I'm trying to remember, I just got done watching the movie. I don't even know if they ever mention at any point that it's Castle Rock that they're in. I'm trying honestly to remember. There might be like a very brief reference here or there, but yeah. So that's basically your story. You have a rabid animal, this rabid Saint Bernard, and just the disillusion of a marriage with you know, an aspect of infidelity that I had not mentioned as of yet. And so the tension in this marriage is because of the fact that, yeah, Dee Wallace has been, she's been, you know, jumping on a different pogo stick, and her conscience is eating her alive, and so she's breaking it off with dude. He gets pissed off. Husband suspects something. It's a small town. What are you doing screwing around in a small town? You gotta quit screwing around, to quote South Park. And yeah, the husband driving around one day and he sees them arguing. It's a pretty small town. Anyway, so he finds out, he questions her on it. Turns out at the very same time, his commercial, he's basically an advertiser, and one of the firms that he's representing is like this sugar cereal company and stuff. And so, I mean, there's all of this stuff going wrong with his career, with his family. Nope, nothing wrong here. So, yeah, it's just everything is kind of crumbling within the family, and then sure enough, to add insult to injury, when they take their car to get looked at by this kind of abusive dude named Camber, I want to say, and they, you know, they see him early in the film and whatnot. But yeah, after Cujo is going rabid and starts killing people, that's basically when Dee Wallace as Donna, the mom, and her little tadpole, her son, you know, they get to have their little Pinto looked at, and that's where they encounter rabid said dog, and things just go nuts from there. They're trapped in this vehicle, they're dehydrated, it's super hot. The alternator, I think, is what goes out, if I remember correctly from watching it yesterday. And yeah, it's a frightening situation, mind you, and the tension is actually built pretty well, you know, once they're trapped in there, but it doesn't really happen until the last like 30 minutes or so of the movie, 30 something minutes, and so up until that point it's just really, it's a family drama that, you know, they're like sowing the seeds through a slow burn for this eventual confrontation with the dog. And I don't know, it's well orchestrated once the attacks start going down and they're trapped, and I guess this is a good way to segue into performance and whatnot. Dee Wallace kills it in this movie once it really gets to the point for her to shine, where she's quiet and just kind of, you know, you can tell she's reserved because of the fact that she feels so terrible about what she's been doing. She's not really very impressive in the first like 2/3 of the film. However, she does truly rise to the occasion in Mama Bear mode once she actually has to protect her son, who is already kind of a little scaredy cat, temperamental boy from, you know, seeing the, you know, thing in his closet, and you can tell that he's very similar to me when I was that age, you know, very active imagination, monsters and whatnot, and so she gives a dynamite performance. I mean, like her screaming and wailing and everything. And I really got to give this kid, who I believe it was his first acting role, they say, and introducing so-and-so as Tad. Both of them, you feel their pain and you feel their fear. And I mean, that's what really makes the movie, is the last 30 minutes or so, 30 to 40 minutes, when they're actually trapped in this vehicle and like the whole cat and mouse of Cujo trying to get into the car and terrorize them, and you know, he's headbutting it, battering ram style, and you know, he bites up Dee Wallace pretty bad at one particular point, so you know she's infected with rabies or going rabid or whatever, so she's gonna have some very, very painful shots if she does in fact survive this scenario. And yeah, lo and behold, husband, he's like, I can't be trying to save this account, I've got to go back, and it's really a pretty basic story in both the book and in this film adaptation. The film adaptation, it's funny, the director and the DOP, so the director of photography, they both walked out 2 days into filming. I tried to do some research and couldn't figure out why this happened. King was a very hot commodity and property at the time, so I don't know if it was creative differences or what, but last minute they decided to bring in this guy Louis Teague, who in the late 60s had done an episode of the Alfred Hitchcock Hour. He was coming off of Alligator, which is actually, as far as big stupid ass creature movies, pretty fun. I like Alligator. And so yeah, he's tapped to do this, and it's well shot, you know, some of the camera angles, especially like some of these aerial shots that they have of especially the confrontation at the end, where, you know, you see like this, it's almost like somebody's looking up out of the second story window down at the conflict as it's going down, especially with Dee's final conflict with Cujo. There's some very interesting POV shots that they decide to go with during some of the fighting, where you see a lot of Cujo's, you know, perspective, and that's pretty cool. So there's some inventive camera work in this. I'm not sure if it was shot in Maine or just somewhere in New England, or, you know, if like the Dead Zone, it was shot up in Canada, but nonetheless, beautiful locale. The house that the Trentons have, like their overlooking view of the ocean and stuff from this ginormous front yard, you can tell they've gotten money from the fact that he's in advertising and successful account, which is, you know, advertising these sugary, super popular cereals on TV and whatnot. But so yeah, it's a very well shot movie. It's well acted for the most part, especially, you know, Dee Wallace and, you know, once again, the kid who plays Tad, the son. But I just can't love this movie because I don't love the story. I will always pick the book over it, and the book is just crazy because of the fact that there's no chapter breaks, but there's little indented, almost like paragraph breaks, I guess you could say. But it is really, in a lot of ways, a similar approach to Misery, except with a few more little markings to show when, not Misery, I should say Dolores Claiborne, where it's just kind of, it's constant storytelling, and, you know, there's no real room to breathe. It just has the little breaks when it jumps from perspective to perspective. Welcome to Perspectives. It's 4:55 a.m. So yeah, I mean, another aspect I have to mention is this is not really, I don't know how much it really warrants its R rating in a lot of ways, with the exception of, I think there's maybe just a handful of F-bombs that were dropped, and I guess this being 1983, you couldn't really say any F-bombs without getting an R rating. But, you know, by the time the 90s came, and as long as you weren't using your F-bombs in the context of sex, you could use like 2 or 3 a movie or something like that. Or so yeah, so that's one thing. And also the carnage is like the dog attacks are not very bloody or crazy. I mean, honestly, you see more blood and slime and dirt on the dog than you ever do on any mangled body or person that he attacks. And, you know, they did have somebody doubling in a dog-like suit for some of these attack scenes. I've seen some of the behind-the-scenes photos. They're quite funny. And so, it's not really overly violent or bloody. Like, the extent of the blood that you really see is like when you see Dee's leg at one particular point after Cujo, like, bites a big old chunk into it. But yeah, the dog being covered in carnage is really the extent of the gore that you see in this, and there's really not much else to speak of. Once again, just like in the book, I'm really feel like Bannerman, for being such a great character in the Dead Zone, got a disservice by both King and, you know, in turn in this story. Like, I don't even think he shows up until I want to say in the book it happens like maybe halfway, 2/3 of the way through, because it's been a few years since I've read the book, but he doesn't even have his little altercation with Cujo until like the last 15-20 minutes of it, if I remember correctly. They did orchestrate the whole barn fall pretty good, but yeah, the stuff that goes down with him and with him and Cujo is disappointing, especially after how great Tom Skerritt, you know, who you've seen in well, the original Alien a few years before this, most notably as the captain on that ship. But yeah, I keep coming back. As you see, I keep circling back to the fact that this story just doesn't do it for me. But it's important to talk about, because I know that despite it made its money back, it's gained kind of a cult following, especially for how bonkers Dee Wallace goes, you know, in that ending. But it's a weird story of just, it's almost like moral karma for Dee Wallace's character, and just everything that she deals with. And the karma really, really hits hard in the book, much more so. And that's something that they very deliberately changed in the script for this. The ending and the fate of one particular character is completely different. And some people like the ending to the film better, while others think the ending to the book is much more befitting of just some of the transgressions of the Donna character. I don't know if that's necessarily fair or not. I feel like there is a lot more catharsis to the ending of the book especially, and, you know, the fact that King, almost in like a little borderline epilogue in the book, mentions that, you know, Cujo was just misunderstood. He really was a good dog at heart, you know. He was just overcome by the madness of, you know, of the rabies and whatnot. So, yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think of other things to mention here, but yeah, I guess I really have touched upon the predominance of it. There's a couple different versions of this on DVD and Blu-ray. So this is the 2013 edition that actually features a new 2012 recorded commentary with Teague, the director, who went on to do like Jewel of the Nile, which was the sequel to Romancing the Stone, but mostly television and stuff after that. But I must say, like, Cat's Eye is not too terribly put together. I enjoy it. While it's not one of my favorite King anthologies, once again, this is well filmed. I enjoy Alligator, but he did primarily TV work and really just kind of fell off the radar in the 90s and the new millennium and whatnot. But this is, at the end of the day, a well-made movie, and I am actually thinking I'm going to rewatch it and listen to his commentary just from a filmmaker's perspective to get his, you know, his viewpoint and his outlook and his thoughts on how the film is aged. But the edition that you really need is the one that I traded in before I picked this up, before realizing a ton of the bonus features that are on the 30th anniversary of this are not on the 35th anniversary. Totally bunk, which means I now need, if I'm going to be the completist that I am, to go back and purchase, once again, the 30th anniversary of Cujo, so that I have those cool behind-the-scenes docs and the supplemental. If you have only one version to own, this is not the one to own. The one that you want to own is the 30th anniversary of Cujo. I believe they have the same set of special features on both the DVD and the Blu-ray, so if you're fond of supplemental stuff like I am, definitely make sure to pick up the 30th anniversary, not the 35th, or you can give King more of your money and just buy both, like I'm going to end up in that particular boat of. So if you enjoy this film, or if you haven't seen it, I am not denouncing this movie. I definitely recommend the book, and I recommend the film, but once again, story-wise, it's just not my cup of tea. However, that does not mean that I feel like it was executed poorly on either the page or the screen. So one little amusing post note that I have to mention is that they've been talking about doing a very pseudo remake of Cujo for a long time because, you know, everybody is remake crazy with the King properties, from, you know, the Stand remake that's in development at CBS All Access, to the Pet Sematary one that's currently filming, to the rabid success of the It, not even remake, like reimagination, I think is the better way that I could put that one. But yeah, so King properties are super hot, but even before that new onslaught really started hitting heavy with It, and, you know, stuff like 1922 and Gerald's Game and Mr. Mercedes becoming so celebrated as well, and currently Castle Rock also, of which there are a few references to Cujo. And that's another little thing I have to just inject really quickly. Cujo is one of those stories that King just likes to reference over and over and over. The St. Bernard attack. It pops up in Pet Sematary. It pops up at one particular point, I think, in The Dark Half. And there's a mention in Needful Things. I mean, it's one of his most iconic stories, even if for me it's not one of his best. But back in 2015, it was announced that they were trying to get this pseudo reimagining, and it felt like one of those horrible films that forgot the face of their father type reimaginings. Check it. You know, I'm in a band called Chiron, so Chiron is an acronym for Created Heroes in Response of Otherworldly Nemesis. Well, this is a title after my own heart, as stupid as it sounds, but apparently for this reimagining of Cujo, Cujo is an acronym that stands for Canine Unit Joint Operations. What the hell? Still hasn't happened yet, but it's still listed on IMDb. There's still rumblings, especially, like, how could this not happen now with the resurgence of El Rey? I think it's inevitable that we are going to see this wacky as fuck sounding bit of ridiculousness called the Cujo acronym. So yeah, I honestly can't wait to see that in all of its ridiculousness. I'm thinking suddenly of that movie Man's Best Friend from the 90s about, like, the weird genetically altered dog or something. But in any event, I think that is as good a point as any to just kind of wrap up this latest installment of Hail to Stephen King. I have been Jaime and Fuego. You can find moi on all social media sectors like Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and a little bit on YouTube, especially very soon with my birthday month of September coming up. I think we're creeping close to some new Infuegotainment content. I'm still debating whether I should hit the Patreon, whether I should go a little combination of both, like what the deal is, because I have so much I want to cover and some time that I think that I do have to do it, and it would just be, you know, more of the non-scarific variety. So we'll see how all of that goes. But there's lots of old Infuegotainment reviews and bits of fun that you can check out there if you want to just go through the archives, because there's a lot there. If you want to go through the archives here on The Horror Show, well, first and foremost, you need to subscribe. You need to hit that bell so that you get all of the notifications about our constantly archiving bits of content, which happens 2 to 3 times a day, peeps. Seriously, including every Tuesday and every Sunday. Hail to Stephen King. Now, Saturday, September 1st, just as a big reminder, if you are a fan of this program, if you're a fan of Sai King, I want you to email me at the link below, that's right, infuegomedia@gmail.com, with your pictures, your thoughts, maybe a quick 1 to 2 minute video about just your love of Stephen King, maybe some fond memories of this program if you've been watching for a while, or if you've recently discovered it, because on September 1st we're going to be celebrating the 100th episode of this program. There's going to be a new set, because I've been getting so much shit about my lack of bookshelf at this point, because in the 100 episodes of this show, the shelf has grown. So yeah, you guys can look forward to that. It's going to be just a big fan appreciation event with a live AMA, the second one I've ever done, which is an Ask Me Anything. There's going to be different bits of trivia. There's going to be live chat fan interaction. There's going to be prizes like Coexist shirts and stuff. Maybe a few King goodies. So yes, once again, hit me up on social media, or excuse me, on my email with any of that memory stuff, whether about this program or about our favorite author. And lastly, if you want to interact a little bit beyond just the comments below here on this video, there's the Hail to Stephen King Facebook group that I created a few months ago that I let sit on the shelf and didn't do anything with. And then once I got it roaring, we're creeping close to 200 members at this point. point, which is a lot of fun. It's a very active community. We talk about what we're reading. We ask one another, thoughts about different books and stuff like that. We have Tower Tuesday every Tuesday where we post stuff about the Dark Tower, quotes, memes, pictures, fan art, all kinds of rad stuff. So it's basically just a very cool community, King Forum, where, we have so many different peeps that are on there constantly that I could give shout outs to, and, much love to all of y'all for, just getting involved. And yes, it is greatly appreciated, and I look forward to hopefully having some further palaver with all of you on that 100th episode. So until the Wheel of Ka comes around once more, I must say, hasta luego, sin amigos, as in cinema, friends. That is right. I hope we get to reconnect sooner rather than later. And until that wondrous moment happens, remember, stay scared. And read Stephen King Cujo. Because even though this is a pretty damn good little DV dizzle here, I think you need to check out the source material.